I think probably because I didn't wait for something to happen. I think that's the best answer to that question. I became an English instructor at the Marine Corps Institute out of boot camp because I applied for it, and they accepted me. I was 18, but there I was judging English, and I didn't have any problem with English in high school, so why not?
You applied to March of Time.
Well, yeah. Well, I applied to the March of Time 3 times. Once there at my first post and station at 8th and I here in the barracks in Washington, D.C., and I applied a second time while I was still there, but I was no longer an instructor in English. I was an associate editor of Leatherneck magazine. And I was turned down both times because I didn't have any experience. Of course, the thing on the bulletin board said no experience required. But then, the third time I applied, I was working in the Navy Department because the guy who slept next to me didn't like the job he had, and we were able to change jobs. And I wanted to be there because I thought it was closer to headquarters. Headquarters was in there with the Navy Department because they were more part of the Navy in those days. And I might find some job I'd like to do. Well, I learned a lot about public affairs working in that job, just as I did in publishing and working with Leatherneck. And so one of well, you heard me mention earlier on this Navy Lieutenant, Alan Brown. Well, he was ordered in from the reserve to come in and take over the newsreel desk in public affairs. And I cried on his shoulder one day. I went to luncheon with him and as a PFC, and I said, you know, I've tried to get the March of Time, and I got my 3rd request in now and everything else like that. And about 10 days after that, I got turned down again. And so I went back to his desk, and I said, Lieutenant, I said, I've been turned down again. I guess I better quit on this thing. He said, well, no, wait a minute. Louis de Rochemont, the producer of the March of Time, is coming to Washington the day after tomorrow, and I've got to give him some film. I'll send you over to the hotel. You give him the film. You spend time and talk with him. So I do that, and my lieutenant in the office, the executive officer, had told me about my turn down, and 3 days later, he comes in the office and said, what the hell's been going on? He said, all of a sudden I got orders to transfer you to New York immediately to be with the March of Time. Well, when I got turned down that time, and Alan Brown had sent me with the film over to see de Rochemont, I didn't know that in World War I, now just think of this, in World War I, de Rochemont had been a lieutenant on a destroyer in the Dardanelles, and his roommate, another lieutenant, JG or full lieutenant, I'm not sure which either one was now a rear admiral in charge of naval personnel. So Louis called him up to establish the School of Pictorial Journalism because of all the stock footage he'd been getting up to be able to be used in films he was making, really didn't tell any stories. So he convinced his old pal, now who is the head of personnel, to send him leading chiefs and for first and second class photographers who knew how to handle cameras, to send them up there so he could teach them how to tell stories with them. And that was the start of the March of Time School. That was also, later on, the Time Life did this for still photographers, AP did it, UPI did it, and the major newspapers did it, took cameramen to teach them how to shoot. And so anyway, because of a World War II event, I get the job I want. World War I said, no, not World War II, but a World War I event, I get a job that I want. And so I go to New York and I start out, and that started me off in everything I've done.